Hi there and welcome. My name's Stephen Packer, PGA professional down in Dorset in the south of England, and this is a video that I put together because I really want to try and help some golfers get better this year, and the number one thing which I get asked for all the time is power. How do I hit the golf ball further? How can I get more out of my swing? So there's a number of things that I want to talk to you about today to help with the efficiency of your swing and the speed of your swing, and together we're going to be able to add some yards to those drives and those irons. Now, first of all, what is power? Power, quite simply, is speed times strength. So I can't make you any stronger in the space of this video, although you can after months of training like Brooks Koepka does and like Bryson DeChambeau has. However, what I can do is get you all moving faster. So what you're going to ask me is, how do I move faster? What do I need to do? Am I mobile enough, flexible enough? And the answer is yes. Every single person I work with has gained distance, can gain distance, and there are many things that you can implement into your swing that will give you more speed. So I'm going to talk about these things one at a time. I'm going to start with the setup. I'm then going to talk about the takeaway and the backswing. I'm going to talk about the downswing and the finish, and I'm also going to give you some drills to help you with the feels of what I'm going to be explaining to you. So first of all, I think it's important that we have a look at the setup to make sure you're starting in the right place and in a position where you can actually hit that golf ball further with the way that you're standing. Okay, so the first stop on our journey to gaining some more power and therefore some more distance is looking at the setup. So I get asked a lot of the time, what's the best stance width? So how wide should my stance be? Now, rule of thumb, it does vary a little bit depending on how tall you are, how long your arms are, but a really great base to start from is what I'd call jumping stance. So effectively, when we actually hit golf balls, we use our feet not really for side to side, we're actually using our legs and our feet to push and resist against the ground. So if we're looking to be in the best position to push against the ground, the stance width is very important. We need a width that we can actually apply maximum force to the ground, push as hard as we can against the floor, and then obviously using that floor we can generate more speed into our swing. The best way we can actually find the width of our stance is by a jumping exercise. So what you're going to do is get into a bit of a space, make sure the ceiling's obviously not too low, and we're going to jump twice in quick succession, and wherever we land is where our feet have applied the most force against the ground to jump, which is obviously leaving the floor. That's applying so much force that we're actually leaving the floor, and then wherever we land is where our feet were positioned in order to jump as high and as far as we could. So for me, that's somewhere close to about 12 inches from heel to heel, maybe a little inside that. Now you might think that's very narrow. My next bit of advice is going to obviously make your stance feel and look a lot wider. So what I'm going to get you to do is feel like you turn your toes out. So we're going to go to what I would call sort of penguin feet, duck feet. We're going to get those toes turned right out. And I like to call this narrow heels and wide toes. So what we're doing is we're narrowing the heel base, we're widening the toe base, and by turning those toes out, we're really opening up our hip joint and our hips in order to turn more in the backswing and the through swing. So it's actually going to give us more range of motion when we're actually looking to create turn in the backswing. So we're going narrow with the heels, wide with the toes, jump to find how wide those heels should be apart, and that's going to give you the base that we need to be able to start to add some power to your golf swing. Here's an example of 3 players on tour all demonstrating toe flare. You'll note that their heels are not excessively far apart, and what's interesting is they're all longer than the average players on tour with the driver. The next thing we need to look at in the setup is our forward bend, okay, our body's forward bend. Now there's a couple of things we need to talk about with forward bend. It's very, very important. The first one is how much you should have. Now, I mean, the tour average is between 30 and 35 degrees, some even a little bit more over if they're very, very tall. So, so it's quite bent over, not quite 45 degrees, but, nicely bent over. Very important for generating power because we actually use our forward bend in the golf swing, okay, as almost like an axe chopping motion. So the best way I can explain this is when we set up, our chest is facing the floor, okay, so the centre of my chest is facing the floor. At the top of my backswing, my chest is no longer facing the floor, it's pointing up somewhere, if not level, up a little bit to the sky. So what that basically means, at some point in time in the golf swing, my chest is extended up, okay, and obviously I've turned and I've side bent as well. That's got me to this sort of backswing position that we're so familiar of, but we've extended, we've gone from our flexed position to a really stretched and upright position, okay, and then what we do is we then flex down again as we hit the golf ball, and that extension and flexion is one of the big downward components in a golf swing that actually helps us to hit down on the golf ball. But more than that, it's one of the things that we would use if we were, say, chopping wood. It's a big power move if we were chopping wood. You'd be there a long time chopping wood if you just used your arms. So that extension and flexion, very, very important in the golf swing. So having enough forward bend, very important. The way I like people to find this forward bend is they stand up nice and straight, nice straight legs, and they just lean forwards and let their hands run down the fronts of their legs until they find the top of their kneecaps. So we're going to get there, we're going to bend forwards until we find the top of our kneecaps, okay? And at that point, we're just going to add a little bit of soft bend in the knees, okay? And that's going to represent our most optimum posture that we can sort of look for. Now, I see a lot of pros and players sort of striving for what they call that straight posture, so where they try and get 3 contact points on the back and they try and bend forwards and have this ultra straight spine. Now the problem with that is, in order to get that spine in that ultra straight position, we have to extend our back, okay? So we'd almost be flexing from the waist and extending our spine. Well, hopefully you'll all see a problem with this already with what I've just explained about the role of posture, is to extend and then flex. Well, if we start bent forwards in an extended position, I've got nowhere else to extend. I'm going to be completely stuck in my backswing with nowhere to move and nowhere to go in order to generate length in my golf swing. So actually what I'm after with most of my guys is what I call a slump posture. We're looking actually for you to tuck your bum underneath your body, not stick your bum out and create that arch in the lower back. We want a soft posture with the lower half of your body. We want rounded shoulders. We want those arms hanging and rounded down. And we also want the neck relaxed and hanging down as well. We don't want the neck extended. We don't want the back extended. We don't want the lower back extended. Those things are going to really block your stretch and extension in the backswing. Another thing that's worth mentioning, obviously, is the width of the arc of the golf swing, i.e. the leverage, plays a big part in how much power you can apply to a golf ball. That's why, people with very long arms and very tall bodies tend to be able to hit a golf ball a little bit further. It's all down to reach. Now, if you stress your shoulders back, pinch your shoulder blades together, you're going to limit how far your reach is with your club. So if I then round my shoulders off and stretch my arm out, we can see suddenly we've got a much bigger reach, and I'm going to make a much wider golf swing, and that's going to obviously benefit me again in creating power. So just to recap, it's important to slump in your posture. You want to run your fingers down until they find the top of your kneecaps, nice bit of soft bend in your knees. You want to relax your neck, relax your shoulders to create not just a soft posture that you can then extend and use. You're also going to be widening your reach out with your arms, making sure you've got maximum reach here so that you can create the widest golf swing possible to create the most leverage and force. Okay, so that's the role of posture in the golf swing. Very, very important for generating power. Okay, so the next part of what we've got to look at is how much lower body rotation you have. So I've sort of already alluded to the fact already that a lot of giving you more speed is actually going to be giving you a longer golf swing. So maximising how far you can turn, twist, stretch, that is going to give you the most force that you can possibly generate. So turning is a big part of that. Now, I see a lot of people really focusing on their upper body turn, trying to get their upper body back as far as possible, but very few people actually working on how much turn their lower half generates. Now, as a rule of thumb, we're looking for 50-50. We want 50% of your rotation coming from your legs and 50% of the rotation coming from your torso. And we need the combination of those two pieces in order to make our maximum swing length, which on tour is further than 90 degrees. In fact, the average turn on tour is almost up to 100, 105 now, so very important for power. So very, very simple exercise to see how much turn you've got. If you get your golf club, get into that nice slump posture that we talked about earlier, and then we're going to get our duck feet and our nice narrow heels, and we're going to then twist a few times, okay? And we're going to see how far our club can actually move around in the backswing. Now the goal is for that club to be able to turn 45 degrees. Obviously 90 degrees would be facing right in front of you, 0 facing down the target line, 45 pointing somewhere in between the two. And you can use your a golf mat to help with that. If you stand in the middle of a golf mat down the target line, if your club points to the corner of the mat, that's going to give you 45. Other than that, just use your best judgment, okay? Now, if you can't make 45, which is very common, you've got your flared toes, you've tried to turn, you're only getting 30 degrees, you're not quite getting to that magic 45, what we're going to want to do is actually withdraw that right foot a little bit. So we're going to pull that right foot back, maybe an inch, maybe 2 inches if required, to try and get that turn, okay? Now, I would sort of affectionately call that the Arnold Palmer foot. You know, Arnold Palmer always played golf with his right foot pulled back. It's a really great thing to do if you're looking to increase your rotation and increase your mobility. So that stance is really going to help you to make the right moves and to create the most twist, or at least the right amount of twist, rather than obviously being restricted. So really, really good. Get that right foot pulled back. Now, a lot of people, when I do mention that, they get really worried. Well, how am I going to aim if my right foot's pulled back? Most important thing to understand is your feet don't really dictate where the ball goes. They definitely influence it, because as you can hear, it influences how much you turn, and turn can influence the shape and the direction the ball starts. So effectively your feet are positioned in a place to help you to move properly rather than to help you to aim. All you need to do is aim normally, get set to your target where you'd feel comfortable that you are aligned correctly, and then the last adjustment you'll make is pull that right foot back. It is not going to mess with your alignment at all with regards to the direction that your torso is set to send the ball. Your foot is merely pulled back, enabling you to turn more so that you can deliver the club with the speed and the angle that you're looking to produce. So have a little play around with that right foot. It's going to make a massive difference to how much you can turn and how much speed you can generate, and there's some of the simple setup things that you can work on to help give you some more power. I hope you enjoyed trying them out, and I'd love to hear some feedback on how they go. Here's a perfect example of Arnold Palmer playing with that signature right foot pulled back. Look at how it's allowed him to make a full turn and really maximise his twist. Okay, so just want to talk about the hip turn on its own just for a little bit here, how the hip turn works. So what we really want to see in the backswing is we want to see the left knee bending more, the right leg straightening, and this right hip pulling back. And you can see that this right leg going straight, this knee going forward, really helps this hip pull back as far as it can, creating the biggest turn. And then from there, it's a very small amount I have to do actually with my upper body to get to the top of a reasonably long golf swing. Now, for all of those obviously that want to increase their length of swing but feel they're not so mobile, this can also be done by allowing that left heel off the floor. So if we look at Mr. Nicholas, we remember how Jack used to sort of swing and still does swing to a certain extent. At the top of his swing, that left heel was off the floor. Now, that's absolutely fine, provided that right leg straightens, that left heel goes off the floor, we're not in any trouble. It's if I see the heel going off the floor and the hip swaying to the side, that is what we don't want to see. So that is going to be a really big problem if that's what's happening. But to allow that heel off the floor, keeping your bum sort of twisting in one spot, that right leg straightening. That is exactly what we want you to feel and to do. So maximize that hip twist. The bigger the hip twist, the longer the golf swing. The longer the golf swing, the further you're going to hit the golf ball. I really want you to work on generating more movement from those hips, because it's going to be a massive, massive difference between you getting that club head speed and not. Maximize the hip twist, maximize your torso twist, maximize the length of the golf swing. You will hit the golf ball way further. Here's a collection of some of the greatest players of the game, all demonstrating the same movement. Their front leg is bending, their rear leg is straightening, allowing their hips to turn. All are doing it a unique amount, but all are doing the same style of movement, flexing and straightening and turning the hips. It's a power movement that all the greatest players demonstrate. If you're interested, do feel free to pause the video here and look at each player's legs individually. Right, now it's time to talk about the golf swing itself, what things we can do to actually increase your potential for power in the golf swing. The first thing that I would like to sort of discuss is hand path, how the hands can actually help you to generate more speed and how you can actually change the way that your hands move, and it's going to make a massive, massive difference to your swing's path, your angle of attack, and how you can actually hit that golf ball with a lot more force. So, long story short, hand path is not club head path, it's just the way your hands actually travel in the backswing to the top, and then how they travel back down to roughly where they started again. So hand path is really important because it's the hands that are holding the club and the hands applying force to the club. So if we can get the hands working better, we're going to pull on the club better, and that's going to move the head faster. Okay. Now I've got a really, really big problem in the most part with a vertical hand path. So that's hands that set out a little bit too straight, don't ever start to move inwards, keep moving up and up and up and up. And then the problem is, because they get so steep, what happens is as you go to pull down on the club, the shaft pitch is way too steep. Everything has to pause and stall for you to unload and deliver the club. So basically you have to turn on the brakes early, you don't get to apply your full amount of force, and then that results in the club chucking out, and then you duffing the ball or slicing the ball or pulling the ball, all which are not desirable. So an inward hand path is something which I find is very important, and it can be progressive, like I'll talk about here, or it can happen late, and that's not a problem, and I'll talk to you about both scenarios. But effectively, anyone that struggles with turn, I would suggest to you quite dramatically that you get the turn happening very early in your golf swing, and as you can see, as you turn early, your hand path will move inwards, and the more in and around your waist your hands go, the better your potential for energy, because you've displaced your hands the furthest in this short amount of time, whereas if you go back much straighter, your hand displacement is an awful lot less. And of course, as we said, it's the hands that pull on the club that give the club power and energy. So what we really need to see is those hands moving in and around, in and around. And as you can see, just because my hands are moving in doesn't mean my club head's moving in. In fact, quite the contrary. If I move the club head in, my hands tend to move out and up. If my hands move in and up, my club head tends to stay out. So it's a big misconception that an inward golf swing is bad, a flat golf swing is bad. It is only bad if the club head goes inwards rather than the hands going inwards. And the hands are going to be very much dictated by how much space they're given by the hips and by the legs as you go back in the backswing. Now, as you can see, as I'm making this nice inward hand path, you can see that my legs are changing flex and my right leg is straightening. Well, that is something not to be worried about, because the straighter you get your right leg, the more that right hip's going to be pushed back, the more turn you're going to get. So I would actually suggest that the straighter your right leg and the more therefore turned your hips are, the more your hands are going to move inwards and the better your golf swing is going to get. So really, really work hard on creating an inward hand path. because the more in the hands move, the more out and towards the ball they can move on the way down. And as they move out towards the ball in a very aggressive way, you don't have to put on the brakes. Your body can continue to turn because the club's being delivered from around. Remember, if the club pulls down, your body has to stall, turn has to stop, and the club has to unload. Reason being, if you did turn on the power and continue to turn and continue to really swing at the golf ball, the club would actually find itself so far over the top of the golf ball that you would literally miss it. And the beauty of our brains is that if we give it a task, it will endeavour to try and achieve it. So the reason that doesn't happen is your brain switches on and says, I've got to hit this golf ball. And the reaction is your body then goes into shutdown mode, the club throws out, and then it gets dumped into the floor. So I really want you to work hard on trying to get this nice big inward hand path, allow that right leg to straighten, allow this right pocket to move back as far as possible, and all those things are going to encourage the greatest potential for power at the top of the backswing, for those hands to then pull down into the ball and to enable you to continue to turn on the power and pull down as you hit. Don't let your hands go up, don't let your hands...
Here's an example of what we've just talked about with Matt Kuchar here on the driving range. What we're going to see is the first half of Matt's backswing is going to be all hips, legs and hands, as we talked about. So that leg flex change is going to happen very early in the backswing. It's going to allow him to make his full hip turn early in his backswing, and that's going to allow his hands to move inwards and upwards behind him as far as possible, getting that inward hand path early in the backswing. So by the time he's reached halfway back, you're going to see that the second half of his backswing is just an arm lifting and loading into his body, ready for him to pull down. So definitely inwards in the first half, and then more upwards in the second half of the backswing. You'll note, like we said, all the hip turn, all the leg flex changes happened by the time the club has got halfway back, and that last little bit is a lift and a load as he gets to the top. That's going to allow him to pull from around, to obviously hit with as much power as possible and create a very consistent delivery for the club. Now, there's no wonder why this guy is called Cash Machine Kuchar, because with this technique he really will just keep winning checks. So really try and copy Matt Kuchar, get those legs changing flex early, get a big hip turn happening early, and allow those hands to move in and behind you. The golf swing, as we said, the backswing is just a marriage of inwards and upwards. So get that inwards happening, and then just let the upwards happen at the end before you start to pull down.
Second little model that you could use to help, this is for the more flexible people. So I would say this is a much more athletic move. It's a better player's move. So if there's any good players out there, and I'm talking sort of single figures, 5 handicap down, that do struggle with pitching the shaft in a little bit too steep, this is probably the one for you. I wouldn't work on turning your hips too early, although there's plenty of players that do present that. Matt Kuchar is one of them. But I would actually advocate more of a Rory style golf swing. And if we watch Rory, what he does is he does his inward hand movement very late. So we talked about the hands have to move inwards, and the more in they go, the greater potential for power. The more up they go, the more you have to turn on the brakes and stop. Well, what Rory does, very interestingly, is he does all of his upper body movement first. So that's why the club goes back very straight. There's no early hip turn, because as we can see, early hip turn pulls the club and the hands inwards. He actually keeps his lower half quite stable, quite still. His upper body goes back, forcing the club out. But then in the second half of the backswing, by the time his club meets his chest, he actually puts all the turn into his backswing. So from that point onwards, he really turns, he really sinks his hips, and he gets that club way in behind him. And that's something that's really interesting to note, that you don't actually have to go and swing in the same way. Everyone doesn't have to do the same motion. You can do different variations provided the outcome is the same. And the backswing is just a marriage of the hands moving inwards and the hands moving upwards. So long as you have the right amount of in and the right amount of up, you can still make a very functional backswing. So I'm advocating for the most part the hands move progressively inwards, and more in than up in the first part of the backswing. So it's more in, then maybe a little bit more up later. Whereas with a Rory, he does his up first and his in second. So long as that sort of balance is there between in and up, it doesn't matter when you do the motion, it just matters that you get both of them in, otherwise you'll be in trouble with your hand path. But let's assume everyone's got to the top of their golf swing now, we've had our hands move in and up, we're now in a position that we can actually start to apply force on the way down, and I'd like to talk to you about how we can do that a little bit more effectively.
So here's an example of Rory, just working that slightly different way of loading than Matt Kuchar. What we're going to notice is Rory's swing is going to be very much arms, hands and upper body. Lower half very static, very stable. So what we're going to see is those hands and arms for the first part of that backswing, they go much straighter back, they lift more up. Then by the time the club gets halfway back, the up portion of the swing has sort of been done. Rory then has this massive late turn, so putting a little marker on his belt buckle here, what you're going to see is a real late turn in his hips. You're going to see that right leg straighten more, that left knee bend more, and his hips get really deep in behind him. This has enabled the club to work really inwards for the second half of the backswing, and it's got him to that really nice top of the backswing position with that hand path way behind him and swinging from around more than up. Very difficult way to do it though. I would warn you away from something like this if you did lack turn in your golf swing as a trait. Actively discouraging turn in the first part of the backswing, not a good idea for those guys. Apart from that though, very big advocate of Rory's second move. This late turn and sink, which we see Rory do, this late hip turn and this late leg flex change, something that is really good and positive and really helps the club get nicely behind and helps you to really yank on the club on the way down. We're definitely going to be using this golf swing as an example, demonstrating another part of the power principles later on in this video. But just to recap, both Rory and Matt, they both go in and up. Rory goes up then in, Matt goes in then up. But the result is still the same. Both hit the golf ball really well, very consistently, and win lots of money. So good to copy what these guys do.
Okay, so we are talking about the top of the backswing now. We've made a big turn with our hips, we moved our hand path inwards. We got to the top of our backswing where we've got full stretch, so we've managed to get more turn out of our legs, so we've got maximum turn out of our legs, we've got maximum stretch out of our torso, and we've got our body all the way around to the top of the backswing. We need to look at how we start the downswing. So we're going to talk about some ways that you can actually start to create some more force coming down, some more power coming down, and hopefully you can use a couple of these bits to help you. So interestingly, what they've found on tour through all the research and everything that they've looked at with regards to club head speed and the way the best players are generating their club head speed, the majority of the speed in the downswing is actually generated from the top to halfway down. So it's the top of the backswing to where the left arm is level to the floor. That's where the longest hitters are actually turning on their power. So how are they doing that? What they're doing is they are, for the most part, dropping their weight. Okay, so if I said to you, creating speed and force is about pulling down on the grip of the club. How do you pull down the hardest? Well, pulling down with your arms is quite limited. Pulling down with your body weight, so physically dropping your body weight to the floor, pulling down by almost unweighing yourself, that's going to produce the most force. So what we see from, say, Rory McIlroy, for instance, very long player, he actually does what I would call a late hip turn and sink. So this is something that I'm going to try and encourage you guys to do. It's going to give you lots and lots of force. So let's talk about that late hip turn and sink. So as you get to the top of the golf swing, instead of just then getting to the top and then unwinding, what Rory does is he leaves his upper body where it is, he has a late turn and sink of the hips, so he turns his hips further. So say we get to the top of the backswing and we have 45, he adds another 5 degrees or so and also sinks his pelvis down. So he gets to the top, and as he wants to come down, he actually turns further and sinks as his club is falling behind him. So I call this late turn and sink, and this is a really great drill that you can work on to help create some force by unweighing your body and pulling down with your body weight. So we're going to get you to the top, you're going to pause, then what we're going to do is we're going to turn and sink and hit the golf ball, okay? So I'm just going to do a little bit of a demonstration of that so you can see what I'm looking for you to achieve. We're going to get to the top, we're going to turn and sink more and hit the golf. We're going to get to the top, we're going to then turn and sink the hips. And there it goes. So that late turn and sink, get to the top, turn and sink, hit the golf ball. That dropping and unweighing is going to give you a huge amount of force. It's going to help you to hit the golf ball. But again, with your hands pulling from more around, pulling with your body weight, really tugging on that club. And it's going to give such a great deal of force to your golf shots that you've never really had or felt before. So have a little go with that transition, turn and sink. Really exciting, interesting bit of information, and I want to hear how all that goes.
Right, here we are again with Rory. Going to use him as the model for this. So instead of looking at the backswing this time, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the end of the backswing and the start of the downswing, which we like to call the transition. Now, for me, the end of the backswing is signalled when everything stops going backwards and bits of the body start to move forward. So whether that's the knee, the hips, the pressure. But at this point in time, for me, Rory has reached the top of his backswing and he is now just about to start the transitional period to get his body moving forwards. Now what we want to notice is at this point in time, Rory actually turns his hips further. So that belt buckle actually gets further back than where it got to at the end of his backswing. So the start of his downswing, his hips have turned further, and not just that, they've started to lower. So they've started to sink down behind him, over the top of his lead foot. So he's turned further. So instead of getting to the top and then just turning on the power and going back down towards the ball again, he's actually turned his pelvis further at this point and sunk it down over the top of his left foot. And that's, as we've discussed, created a really hard yank on the club. Now, as that club starts to pull down, we can really see how far that pelvis has started to move. And I would suggest that that pelvis has dropped somewhere between 3 to 5 inches, which has really tugged on that club hard and created an awful lot of force in that first part of Rory's downswing, which is where I said the long players are actually making their gains over the top of the shorter players. They basically accelerate the same amount to the ball from here onwards, but the longer players are accelerating harder and faster in this first half of the downswing, which is why it's so vital. So this late hip turn and sink, really yanking on the club and then propelling it through the ball really, really quickly. So it's something that I'd like you to work on. It's a piece that you can add into your golf swing. So instead of just hitting the golf ball and unwinding from the top of the backswing, as you start to unwind certain bits of your body, get your hips turning further and sinking over the top of your left foot. And that's going to create a pull on the club that you've never had before and distance that you've never had before. So experiment with late turn and sink to start the downswing.
Now, talking about the finish, something that's very important to understand is how the golf swing works. So I would liken the golf swing to a crack of a whip. Very, very important to understand that the way that we apply speed to a whip is by actually stopping the handle, and then the power gets transferred from the handle all the way out to the head. If you just kept the whip going in the air without stopping the handle, it wouldn't really do anything. So having a snappy finish, very, very important. A lot of people would call this a punch finish, but a punch finish for me is where the swing finishes and the arms are completely out straight in front of you. I don't want the arms out in front of you straight. I'm actually looking for the arms to be out straight in front of you, but the shaft to be pointing to the sky. So very much an L shape in the finish. Now it's that L shape that creates the snap in a lot of the cases. So what I'm actually looking for you to do to create power, strangely, is take some of your follow through away. So I'm just going to demonstrate this with a golf shot. Now that ball went off really quickly. Strike was really good. You could hear how solid I struck it. Now on this swing, actually, I'm going to give an example of a full swing with a full finish and see how that goes. Okay, still hit it good. Went a bit crazy in the finish. Just to prove my point, it actually came out a lot slower. Ball went shorter, which doesn't really bode well for the long finish. So that just proves, just visually here for me, and hopefully you heard the difference in the strike, how much a snappy finish can improve the power of the strike, the transfer of energy to that ball. So I really want everyone to go out there and practice their snap finishes, arms out in front, shaft pointing up to the sky, and that's going to give you a whole bunch more force when you actually try and hit some golf balls.
For those of you that keep up with your golf on TV, Tommy Fleetwood represents a fantastic example of a player that plays most of his golf with a short and snappy finish, and he definitely has reaped the rewards of extra distance and accuracy using a swing like this.
Right, we've got to the part of the video where I'm really keen to help you with your mobility, to try and maybe gain some more mobility, to get a little bit more out of your golf swing. Some things that are really important for you to have a little go at. The first one is a left arm stretch. So the left arm in the golf swing starts off in front and actually at the top of the golf swing loads across the chest. So we actually see a movement where the left arm loads across our chest. This can actually be quite stiff for a lot of people around their shoulders. So I want you to work on the flexibility of the left arm loading across the chest. So easy one, if you just get your lead arm out in front of you and the back of your trail hand, you pop it in front and under that lead arm, and then you just use it as a lever to pull that arm across your body, stretching that arm across your chest, and you're going to feel a squash obviously between your bicep and your chest. You're going to feel a stretch around the top of your arm, and that is a very important one. And if you did want to turn that into a golf swing, you could really use that to work on propping and stretching that left arm up at the top. Really good thing to do. Next thing which you can actually work on is the upper body and the thoracic extension. So again, a really nice simple one is you can get your palms touching each other in a set-up position. Then your goal is leave your front arm, your left arm in this instance, out in front of you, and then work on trying to stretch your right arm as behind you as possible. So really try and get that right arm pointing as far behind as you can, just seeing it from this side. And that's going to again help open up your chest. It's going to help stretch your upper thoracic. And what you can do is you can actually work on it both ways. Very important on the follow through that we get extension. Very important that we start to get our body limber. So this is something that you can really work on stretching at home to try and increase that range of motion that you get from the upper part of your body. So great exercise. Final one that you can work on if you want, work on opening up those hips to try and get some more rotation. So you can use a wall, you can sort of get your body sort of supported, and what you're going to do is you're going to work on opening up these hips here. So you just get one leg, pop it on top of your knee, like I said, on a wall's fine, and you can work on just easing and pushing that knee down. And what that's going to do, it's going to help open up your hips, because again in the backswing when we turn, we actually move away from that front hip, so we're stretching them apart, very much like we're doing here. We're stretching the front of the pelvis away from the femur. We're really stretching those apart, and it's that motion that we need to rely on to stretch in the backswing and then stretch in the follow through in those hips. So really work on trying to stretch and open up those hips. Work on both sides because they're both vital for the golf swing. Okay, really sit down into them, really push, stretch out that hip, really try and open it up. So you've got hips to work on, you've got your left shoulder to work on the stretch, and obviously you can also work on his brother, the right shoulder, and you can also work on that upper thoracic stretching as you go in the top of the backswing here. All these things are going to help with your mobility to help you hit that golf ball further by stretching your golf swing out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of drills to help apply some of this stuff that we've talked about. One of the ones I want to try and show you is what's been dubbed the best biomechanical drill for speed and power in the world, as researched by Dr. Kwan of the University of Texas. So this drill is simply called step, swing, step, hit. So the way it's going to work is we're going to get set with our feet quite close together, and this is something that you would do hitting golf balls, but I'm going to show you without a ball just to start with. So we're going to get set, we're going to step with our trail foot, we're going to step, swing, we're going to really stretch out our bodies to the maximum that we can in this backswing, then we're going to step, and then we're going to hit, okay? So that's what it's called, step, swing, step, hit, okay? So I'm going to demo that on a ball for you so you can see, but it's going to help with your rhythm, your timing, it's going to help with the transfer of your body and your weight, it's going to help your weight go down and forwards, which is really important in order to generate some speed. So step, swing, step, hit. I'm going to just do it on a golf ball now for you. So it's step, swing, step, hit. What a rocket, that one's gone. I'll do another one for you so that you can see it. Step, swing, step, hit. Okay? Why does this work? Well, basically, when we're stepping, we're obviously helping our body to start the swing with some momentum. So the step creates momentum. We then get to the top of our swing stretch, and then this extra step creates this really powerful pull on the club. Now, like we said, pulling on the handle is the most effective way of giving speed to the club. Now, a lot of people, they sort of like this idea of lag, trying to obviously create an angle between their arm and their wrist, their arm and the club using their wrist. Now, I would suggest that lagging the club doesn't pull on the handle. Lagging the club creates an angular motion where the club gets sort of loaded and thrown. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't contribute to club head speed, but is a far lesser contribution than pulling on the handle. So pulling on the handle is physically yanking on it, whereas lagging the club is loading an angle between the left arm and the club. So for all of you out trying to find more power, lag will not be the answer, it will be pulling harder on the grip. So I want you to all promise me that you'll work harder on pulling on the club than lagging the club, because lagging the club, although it has some small benefits in some instances, largely it makes the swing more complicated, harder to repeat, harder to use, and less repetitive in a number of cases. So I want you to work on step, swing, step, hit, among obviously the other things we've talked about, applying, using just normal swing thoughts, but that is going to get you pulling on the handle harder, and that's going to get you hitting the golf ball further. So work on step, swing, step, hit, and hit that golf ball further. Okay, so next drill that you can do is working with an alignment stick. Pretty well everyone that's a serious golfer and practicer has these nowadays. So what can you do with a swing stick? Well, like I said, the golf swing is not just about, or power, it's not just about strength, it's also about speed. I can't make you stronger, but I can make you faster. So we're going to use this stick to try and increase some club head speed. Now the way we're going to do that is simple. We're going to make some swings, and we're going to listen to the swoosh. Now, as you can hear, that swoosh, quite mild, okay, and I've got quite a long follow through and quite a lazy follow through. I would suggest that having a snappier finish is actually going to create a little bit more speed. So I like to call this snap finish. So we're going to work on swinging this stick, but we're going to really put the brakes on in the finish. Now, as you can see, when I do that, I get a much higher swoosh, a higher pitch swoosh. It's moving a lot faster. Now, why is that the case? Well, the golf swing, interestingly, works more like the crack of a whip than anything. So when you crack a whip, you stop the handle and that rolls the power out to the head. Now, obviously, what we need to do in abruptly finishing, we actually have to slam the brakes on our wrists, and that gives more speed to the head and more speed in this instance to the stick, which is why we get a higher pitch swoosh. Even though this longer follow through you would think is more effective, you can hear that it isn't. Now, more than that, not just working on the speed or the pitch of the swoosh is important, but where the swoosh happens is also exceedingly important. We want the maximum speed to be where the ball is, or somewhere close to. So I would suggest using your left foot as a marker is important. So what I would get you to do is not just improve the pitch of the swoosh, but where the swoosh is. And you've got to use your ears to try and figure out where that is happening. And if you can try and get that swoosh happening somewhere nearer your left foot, you will really find that power will start to come in very quickly. So snap finish, really important, something which we've just talked about. And this is going to help you work on that snap finish and get some more speed into your swing. I hope you really enjoyed my video about power. Take the information on, use bits of it that you like. I'm really excited to hear how you get on, any comments, really open to any questions. A little bit more about where all this has come from, obviously. A lot of this stuff, I didn't invent it, it's not my opinion, although now my opinion is based on all of this information. This is stuff which I've collected over the last 12 years through doing research on what the latest golf researchers are saying, what all the best coaches in the world are teaching, what all the best players in the world are doing. So hopefully you can take this information on for what it is, which is, for the most part completely factual, laced with some of my interpretations and some of my opinions interwoven, but largely speaking, the topics that we've talked about and discussed really based on science. So I hope you enjoy using some of this. It is guaranteed to help you if you apply this all in the right way, and I really hope you all have a great time working on trying to get some more speed into your swing, getting some more length out of your golf swing, working on your stretching, using some of the drills, and we really will see some benefit from you doing those in your golf game when you're able to get out on the golf course and play some more golf. So keep up the practice, keep up the hard work, and I look forward to hearing from any of you who want to chat.